Today we're building an all-white PC inside this NZXT H6 Flow RGB case. So let's first go through all the parts, build everything, and turn it on. Alright, for the motherboard, we're going to use the ASUS RG Maximus Z790 formula. This is an insane all-white motherboard. The VRM heatsink on this motherboard is so robust, you also have the option to pair this with a custom water cooling loop. And we won't be doing that in this current video, but might do that in the future. For the CPU cooler, we're going to use the ASUS RG RYUJIN 3 360 ARGB. This comes in all-white with three 120mm RGB fans. It's going to look great inside this case, which is the NZXT H6 Flow RGB. Just came out recently. Comes with three 120mm RGB fans pre-installed and a pretty interesting airflow setup with intake from the bottom as well as the side and this angled design over at the front. The CPU we're going to use today is the Intel Core i5-14600K, featuring 6P cores, 8 E cores, 20 threads, and a max turbo frequency of 5.3 GHz. The cool thing about Z790 is that it's backwards compatible with 12th, 13th, and 14th gen Intel Core desktop CPUs, so I can always upgrade this to a Core i9-14900K in the future, which is definitely what this motherboard deserves. For RAM, we're going to use Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB sticks. This is 64 GB total, DDR5, I believe at 5200 mega transfers per second. For storage, we're using a 2TB WD Black SN850X, which is a great SSD. 2TB should offer a great amount of storage as well. And of course, to power everything, a 1000 watt 80 plus gold power supply. This is from NZXT, and I almost forgot the GPU. I don't know how I could have forgotten this. Save the best for last. This is the ASUS RG6 4080. It was originally in black, but I painted it white, and this is going to be an awesome addition to this build. Before we get to unboxing everything, ASUS is also hosting the Upgrade-A-Palooza contest. I'll leave a link to ASUS's Upgrade-A-Palooza contest in the description section of this video if you want to enter. Alright, so let's unbox the motherboard. Pull it out here. Ooh, the packaging is insane. Oh my, this looks so cool. So pulling this motherboard out of the box. So for first impressions, this is super heavy. There's also a back plate on the motherboard, and there's a lot of plastic we gotta peel. Next up, let's unbox the AIO. I used the black version of this AIO before, and it was a great CPU liquid cooler. And this is the white version, which is gonna look so cool in this build. What I really love about this AIO liquid cooler, more specifically the fans, is the magnetic daisy chaining feature. And you can just easily attach all the fans by snapping them all together. It saves the hassle of plugging in a bunch of different RGB cables, and it just looks so much cleaner. Now let's unbox the CPU. So we just gotta pull this open, and the CPU is inside this tray, which we will keep for now. SSD. Alright, so here is the NZXT H6 Flow. The case is really interesting. I like this toolless top panel, and you get mesh panels as well, which is really cool. What's interesting is that there's this corner over here. Alright, so let's get to building. So let's open up the motherboard socket, open up the CPU tray, hold it by the sides, drop it down gently, and line it up. And it fits the notches. Lower this down. Socket cover comes off. Lower the arm. There we go, it's in. Now let's install the RAM. I'm going to do the second and fourth slots. Okay, let's unscrew this M.2 heatsink so we can install the M.2 SSD. Let's peel the film covering the thermal pads. Let's drop this SSD in at a 30-degree angle. I also love that ASUS has this M.2 Q latch, which is a toolless design to basically secure the SSD in. Alright, let's take out the motherboard from the box and put this backplate on. Install the AIO standoffs. Now we gotta just lower this down into the case, and there's already a pre-installed IO shield, so we don't have to worry about that. Alright, let's screw in the motherboard with the motherboard screws. Alright, so let's plug in the cables to the power supply. So we have the motherboard 24-pin, 2 CPU power cables, as well as SATA power, and 2 PCIe power cables. So I decided to add 2 NZXT F RGB core fans, and these are 140mm, and this is going to provide fresh intake for the graphics card. Alright, so now let's plug in the front panel cables. then use the long screws to mount the fans onto the radiator and the short screws to mount the radiator onto the case. Alright, now let's install the pump block onto the CPU. And there's already pre-applied thermal paste on the copper cold plate, so let's just lower this down and line it up with these standoffs. Now I gotta take these thumb screws and start screwing it down. And let's tighten it with a screwdriver. Plug in this USB 2 cable to the bottom of the motherboard. Now we have to plug in a couple more fan cables. I have 2 more right here for the bottom fans. All right, so I plugged in all the cables. Now we just gotta install the graphics card. All right, before we install this graphics card, I also really appreciate that ASUS has this PCIe slot Q release button right here to basically open up the PCIe slot with the click of a button, and that helps simplify the installation process when you're trying to install a GPU. Push down until it clicks and it is in. So we got to screw down the graphics card. So this end with the 8-pin PCIe connectors plugs into the power supplies, and we can just plug this end into the graphics card. All right, we have officially finished. Close up this other side panel and turn it on to see if this works. But here is what the almost finished build looks like. I think it's starting to look super clean. Okay, it's starting to look good. I forgot to plug in the RGB cable for the AIO. There we go, we entered BIOS. Now all we have to do is install Windows drivers and get this thing up and running so we can actually use it. Okay, I plugged in the RGB cable to a fan header and an RGB header. Now let's turn this back on. There we go. The fans at the top are spinning. There's RGB, all the other fans are spinning, RGB is going as well. After we get Windows and drivers installed, I'm gonna straighten out the AIO tubes, peel the plastic on the glass panels. All right, we finished installing Windows and drivers. I'm gonna install some games and test out this PC in a bit, but before we do that, oh, that's satisfying. And there we go, this is the finished PC build. All right, I am really satisfied with how this build came out. The all white design just looks so clean. And I think in the future, the only thing I'm gonna upgrade is probably add a couple more custom sleeved cables to make this build look a little bit more uniform, as well as a rear exhaust fan just to fill up this fan slot. Initial performance with this PC is also amazing. I was playing Fortnite and COD Modern Warfare 3 at max settings, 1440p resolution, and I was getting great frame rates. I think the white AIO with the motherboard just makes this build look so cohesive. And if you wanna check out any of the PC parts I use in this build, click the link in the description section of this video. I hope to test this build more in the future. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.